All right, hello everyone. Sorry, a little discombobulated start here. So I'm just getting going. And I remember how to use ZBrush, I swear. So what are we doing? I'm continuing working with AntScan data in this particular ant. Let's see how she's going so far. So this has started with scan data. There she is. There's her little head. And I'm in the process of cleaning up the scan data and making it more usable, something that could be used in an animation or 3D print or something like that. So this is a project that I started a couple weeks ago because I was very excited about the announcement of AntScan. I want to remind everybody that if you'd like to see my previous live streams, because a lot of people were asking about that, you can go to my website, which is bluepatone.com. If it'll load. Website, the internet's slow today. Bluepatone.com, and if you go to CG instruction, I have created this page which has an archive of all my previous live streams in order, so you don't necessarily have to dig through the ZBrush live stream, which can be kind of difficult because they're kind of randomized. But they're all in order for all these various projects I've done over the past few years, and I'm adding to these, digging through the archive and adding to these every week. So here are the previous episodes of AntScan from 1, 2, and today is 3. Okay, so I hope everybody's having a good week. I know it's a crazy world out there. So maybe working on some ants is a nice way to relax and take your mind off of all the insanity that's going on. So where have we left off? I think I did the abdomen last week, so I really need to work on straightening out the legs. So this is kind of where I left off last week. And the legs, as you can see, are still a mess. So let's take a look at the legs. And we'll turn on the solo button. And what we're going to do now is we have all these individual legs. So I separated them out from the scan. And what I need to do is I'm going to turn off solo for a second and turn off the other parts of the model. So just look at the legs. And the trick is, what we want to do is we want to choose, we're going to have these legs, excuse me. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Starting to get allergy season. I don't want to be sniffing the whole time. Okay, so the idea here is we've got the legs separated as different subtools, and I want to make these legs symmetrical, and I want to kind of unfold them so that they're something that could be rigged in an animation, and I want to clean up the topology so we can get nice UVs, etc. So with the legs here separate, I need to choose one leg from each side that I think will be easy to fix or set up. This one's not too bad. I've worked with ones that are much more difficult, especially when you're working with bee legs and they're covered in hair and there's a lot of cleanup. These are pretty straightforward. Very nice, very excellent scan. Again, provided by AntScan. And just as a quick reminder, if you want to get some cool, free, amazing scans of ants. These are extremely high quality. You're not going to get better scans than this because they're created essentially with a particle accelerated, believe it or not. And there's only about 50 of those in the entire world. So this is part of a project that was created with Biomedisa. And what you can do is you can go to antscan.info and click on this button right here. And then there's this database of all these ant scans, extremely high quality, and you can download them for free as STL format, bring them into ZBrush and start working. And that takes about, a minute. And and there's lots of them. I don't know how many there are, but several hundred at the very least, and some of these are really, really cool. Anyone with a, you can even see the how the slices are made. So, and this is a really breakthrough technology, because normally, like, you get a high scan from like a CT scan would take several hours in a specialized lab, and it still wouldn't be as accurate as these. This uses a particle accelerator, so it only takes a few seconds to make the scan. So essentially, they've been scanning and uploading just thousands and thousands of these, and they really want to make like just this massive library. But as you'll see, they still require some cleanup. Okay, so I think I might be procrastinating, so let's stop procrastinating. Here's a good one. Let's start with this one. So what I'm going to do is I like to keep these legs available as a backup. So I'll duplicate this, and let's figure out which leg it is. It is the right leg, right front. So let's name it. And there we go, right front leg. So that way we can separate it from all of these guys. I'll just turn on the solo button. And so you can see we got we got some extra little pieces hanging out that we need to get rid of. And then we're going to separate this into different pieces. If I turn on polyframe, this is what we have. So what I'm going to do is, first I'll go in here and I'm going to do polygroups, autogroups. And this is going to separate each individual mesh into its own polygroup. So that way what I can do is I'm going to hold Control and Shift, click on this. It's going to hide all the other polygroups, so all those little bits that I don't need. And then I'll go in here and say do geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. So now I'm left with just the important parts of the leg. So that's the first part to clean up. Oh, man, I love this. This is what you get out of scans. It's so incredibly hard to get elsewhere, this kind of detail. I mean, trying to see that in a photograph, forget about it. It's never going to happen. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to start separating this into polygroups so I can make individual meshes from each segment of the leg. So this first part, if you're familiar with, let me try that one more time. If you're familiar with ant or insect anatomy, this part is called the coxa. So it's the first leg segment. It's the one that attaches the leg to the body. So I'm going to press Control W to make that its own polygroup. Control Shift click on here so we can see the rest of the leg. And then we have the trochanter right here, femur, tibia, metatarsi, and then the individual tarsi, and then the foot. It looks like part of the foot's missing, but we can always recreate that. That's no problem. So what I like to do is, a fast way to do this is this. I'm going to Control Shift click. Oops. Control Shift click on this. And then, so we already have this polygroup established. So I'm going to go in here and use the select tool, Control and Shift, and select this and hide it and do Control W. Then I'll select this, Alt, hide it, Control W. Now these isn't super precise, but that's okay because we can kind of clean it up as we go along. I just want to get the general idea. Alt, Control W. So I'm just hiding these pieces. I'm not deleting them. And as I hide them, I make a new polygroup with Control W. And you'll see at the end, this is a nice way to quickly make polygroups. Control W. Make a polygroup for this right here, this little spiky thing. Ants usually have this kind of thing to help them when they're crawling up trees and that kind of thing. If you're doing like some kind of insectoid creature of your own. Adding little spiky bits on the legs is a great way to build up some realism and some visual interest. Control W. This one's a little bit trickier because we have this kind of mechanism right here. So what I'm going to do is this. Do Control W, and then Control W, and then if I Control Shift click, you can see here are my polygroups. Now I'll just do a little bit of cleanup. Hide that. And that. And then I'm going to Control Shift click right here on a point that's shared by these two groups. Control W, and then I'm going to so there's a trick here where if you click on a point that is shared, by two polygroups like this right here, it's going to hide everything but those two polygroups. So I can use this as a way to kind of clean up those spots that are hard to get otherwise. So like right here, howdy, thanks for joining me today as we do ants. And I'm just working on the legs here, creating some polygroups before I kind of clean them up with Dynamesh and Topology and all that kind of good stuff. So there. Control Shift, click right on a point right here. And then polygroups are a big part of understanding or working with ZBrush. The more you master working with polygroups, the faster your work goes, the easier it is to organize your models, especially when you're doing this kind of work or you're doing a lot of cleanup. This is a little bit trickier. I'm kind of just making a decision here, which, we're going to do a lot of cleanup here, so if it's not super precise, it's okay. Control W is the hotkey for making a polygroup from what's visible on the screen or on the canvas. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's say that's close enough for jazz. Let's just do a quick look right here. I think this last one right here. I lost the foot on this one, but you can grab a foot from another part of the model. Where's the download button for AntScan? Let's go back here. If you go to AntScan, this is AntScan.info. This one right here, click on this. This will take you to the database. Then you can click on one of these ants, scroll down, and you'll see right here you have the mesh, which is STL format. You can open that in ZBrush using the 3D Print Hub plugin, which comes with ZBrush. And then this is an image, which, well, it's an image. Does that help? Hopefully. Collect them all. It's like Pokemon. Okay, so here's where we're at. Let's save this, since it was laborious and something I don't really want to repeat, but I'm going to have to repeat for the other legs. Okay, so now what we can do is just do a Dynamesh with the groups option. And that will instantly separate these into individual meshes that we can then sculpt. So I'm going to go into Geometry, Dynamesh, turn on Groups. We just Dynamesh at this resolution. That's not nearly enough, so let's up the resolution. It's 87,000, so that's not too heavy, but it retains the shape pretty darn well, and as you can see, it's actually closed off these surfaces. So if I Control Shift click right here, oh, did it actually close off the surfaces? You know why? Because I did the undo and then it turned off the groups. All right, let's go back. Fair enough. Group, put the resolution up here, just something like that. There we go. See how this is closed off. Sometimes when you do an undo, it removes the options, and when you redo it, those options are off. So I just had to redo that. I look like Chuck Norris with glasses. You're the first person in the entire history of the universe to ever say that to me. Microphone just attacked me. Some people say I look a lot like my twin brother, but he doesn't agree with that. Okay. Let me tell you that time I fought Bruce Lee. Okay, so now what we're going to do is do some cleanup. All right? And so we have this nice shape here, and we want to make sure it's not too far from our original model, but this kind of stuff right here, we want to get rid of these thin parts. So I'm going to keep Dynamesh mode on, keep groups on, and then I'll use something like, inflate brush. And the sculptress mode can be useful for this too, because you can use sculptress mode as kind of an eraser to get rid of this geometry. So I'm going to turn on sculptress, and then I can hold the shift key and just kind of erase this kind of stuff. Sometimes in sculptress mode, though, it does introduce some weird stuff here. So just do a little inflate. We just basically squish this down, and so that the next time we Dynamesh, it will be fused together into one blob. And you can go kind of fast and loosen this, as long as you don't lose too much of the original shape. Just want to clean up those edges. Control, drag, and release any time to re-Dynamesh. That closes those holes. You can see and get this pretty quick. It's all about the cleanup. We have a part where these are kind of joining together, so just use Sculptress mode and the smooth brush to erase that. And if we have these like little stray bits right here, you can see all the stray bits. I'm just gonna smooth this a little bit more, get a little distance, and then I'm going to, whoops, just gonna make a quick polygroup out of those little stray bits. So I'll hide that, usual. All right, let's do this again. There we go. Control W just to create a polygroup out of all those little itty bitty bits. And then I'm going to Control Shift click on this once, click on it again to hide that. And I'll just make sure we can see everything. I'll do a quick delete hidden. That gets rid of some of that noise. And then we'll probably have to do that a few more times because you can see we have some right here. Okay, so this is an interesting question. I actually wanted to talk about this. So the question is, hi, I want to start sculpting on an iPad. What do you think about AI and 3D? Will they still be interested in it? Okay, so first question, sculpting on an iPad is very cool. ZBrush for the iPod rocks. I use it all the time. It's got some really cool features that the desktop doesn't have. If you have one of the more recent iPads, you can actually do 3D scans directly into ZBrush, which is really neat. And also, I think the interface is a huge improvement. It's much more intuitive to use. I also like sculpting on an iPad when I'm sitting watching TV, or if I have to go somewhere and I'm waiting around like a doctor's office or something like that. It's awesome to be able to do ZBrush on the go. So totally recommend checking out ZBrush for the iPad. I believe there's a demo version that you can try out. Now, AI and 3D is very interesting and something that I talk a lot about in the live stream. I'm very much torn on this subject. I cannot tell you if I'm 100% in anti or 100% pro. I'm still thinking about it. Some of the tools can help a lot with the tedium of 3D, like, constant retopology. Retopology is fun when you do it on one character. When you have to do it on 100 characters, it gets less fun. There's also AI is used a lot in creating these scan data. So it's not just, the artistic tools, but it's a lot of the backbone. And then there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. Like, for instance, if you wanted to create an environment where you wanted to create an entire town, you could go around and take pictures of buildings and use AI tools to, at the very least, quickly create meshes that you can then clean up. There's also AI tools are going to be integrated more and more into 3D programs. It's already happening with programs like Houdini and that kind of stuff. So it's important to learn AI. If you are 100% against AI and you stick your head in the sands, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Something we discuss a lot is like, is AI going to take away the job of 3D artists? No, AI is not going to take away the job of 3D artists. 3D artists who know AI and know how to use it are going to take away the job of 3D artists who ignore it. So I strongly recommend learning some 3D tools, some AI tools in 3D. Now, that being said, I also agree that there's a lot of danger with AI. And so since you opened up this Pandora's box, I'm going to show you some stuff that I was looking at over the weekend, which really bothered me. So if I go to YouTube, and I'll bring this out real quick. So here is one of my YouTube channels. This is Entomology Animated. So this is a channel that I created when these are animations that I made using ZBrush, Maya, all the traditional 3D tools, and these illustrate various aspects of insect biology. And I worked really, really hard to get these as accurate as possible. They're based on scientific papers, talks with entomologists, etc. So if you go to Entomology Animated, you see this right here. Now this down here, this is AI generated slop. And this is terrible. And it's, it looks really neat, right? I don't know what's going on here. But there are a lot of, so this is one of mine, very accurate, spent a lot of time working on it. This is AI slop. And you see how it's mixed in with these shorts. And these are extremely misleading. A good example, they do a lot of these alimentary canal ones, which I don't think are accurate at all. But if you look at the insects in here, they look very realistic and they look very believable. But the more you watch them, the more you find that there are actually massive errors with the anatomy and so on. So, for example, and it's if we go back to this. Let's see, the insect AI are, at least they're honest in the title. But I want to show you some of this stuff that's really, really terrible. Okay, here's a good example. This is a praying mantis. Would you survive this? Praying mantis versus a bee. I don't know. This is okay. That bee is... I don't know why they're asking us this. Here's one that I saw. Okay, so this looks really believable at first. And if you don't know anything about entomology, you might think this is realistic, but you'll notice this ant has an extra pair of arms, or legs rather, that normal ants don't have. All insects have 6 legs. 6 legs, no more, no less. They all have 6 legs when they're in their adult stage. Caterpillars have like 6 nubbins. But you can see that this one, they've added another pair of legs here. That are they mouth parts? Are they legs? It's hard to tell. And this is also like, okay, do cicadas, it looks like it's hard to see if it's buried in concrete or what. But anyways, there's some other ones that are really terrible. I don't know what the hell that is. Here's a good one. Like, what the hell is this? First of all, that splash is completely unrealistic. And then, when is a praying mantis going to save a bee? When does that happen? That never happens, okay? There's no altruism between species and insects. There is some symbiosis, but not between praying mantises and bees. That's just ridiculous. This kind of stuff is just, it's clickbait and it's really stupid. And it annoys me to no end, as you can see, because I won't shut up about it. There's one in here that I saw that's really terrible. Like, what is this? This is not how insects move, you know? Here's some really weird anatomy. What's going on here with the praying mantis? That's not praying mantis anatomy. I don't even know what the hell this is. This? Oh, here's a good one. Like, what is going on with their mouth parts? And also, an orchid mantis tends to be much, much smaller than a green mantis like this, a typical praying mantis. So it's really irritating to me because, are you sorry you asked this, by the way? Because you can see, if you go back to my channel, right, it's hard to tell the difference between my animation, which is this one right here, which I spent like a year working on, and these, which were probably generated in a few hours without any review. I mean, for all I know, people just typed in prompts and just pop them out to get likes on YouTube. So that's really irritating the crap out of me because I spent a lot of time on this, and this is high quality and this is garbage. So that's one of the big problems with AI, aside from the other problems, which are environmental concerns and so on. So it's a big deal. But there you go. Yeah. A lot of there's also the other thing is the AI backlash. So if you're interested in using AI ethically, which can actually be done, you can train AI on your own artwork and that kind of stuff. But you use AI at all in your description, then you're instantly going to get some hate because people are going to associate it with AI slop and that kind of thing. So there's also a perception problem with AI that's going to make it more and more difficult to use AI in a constructive way because so many people are using it in a destructive way, and that also causes problems. So the future is unclear as to how AI is going to affect, whether it's going to be a net positive or a net negative, I don't know. But I will say that you can't put your head in the sands. It's the same thing that's been happening with Photoshop. We all know that we spend, photographers will spend so much time creating a really beautiful image only to have someone say, that's Photoshop. And then people confuse Photoshop with AI and that kind of stuff. So it's tough, man. It's tough. But, you got to understand, the first thing to do is outline your goals as to why you're doing a particular thing. Why are you using, what do you hope to achieve with CG? If you want to be an artist and have the appreciation of the millions of people, that's cool. That's one thing. If you want to get a job, that's another thing. So you have to figure out what your goals are and how using something like AI can aid that or make it more difficult. So I'm just cleaning this up right here. I'm going to do another, where did I lose my Dynamesh? Yes, lose my Dynamesh, turn that on, make sure groups is still on. Okay, everything's good. You always have to check, whenever you're using Dynamesh or Sculptress or something like that, make sure you zoom out and check and make sure you haven't messed up the model in the process. Okay, so this segment is looking okay for right now. We can do a little bit of sculpting on here, so I'm just use like clay tubes with a low Z intensity and just go in here real quick and just kind of shape it a little bit. There aren't any, yeah, I think the problem with the, there are some tutorials on the iPad, but not enough yet because it's still fairly new. For those of us who are, like, I've been using the iPad since it was in beta, the ZBrush for the iPad. It's taking a while to get to learn it, and the other thing is that it's a little bit harder to record tutorials. I mean, you can either use Camtasia for the iPad, which is pretty good, but then you have to bring it onto the desktop and add the audio and that kind of stuff, or you can hook up your iPad to your computer, which is also kind of a pain. So that's one of the reasons where there hasn't been enough tutorials yet. But since you're asking, I do have a YouTube channel, Blue where I put ZBrush tutorials on a regular basis. So I will try and start putting some iPad tutorials up there because I think it's worth learning it. But I think Maxon does have some tutorials on getting started. The main thing with the iPad is they've rearranged the interface, so they've completely rebuilt it. And of course, most people don't have a keyboard attached to their iPad. You can get one, but most people don't. So they've created ZBrush without hotkeys, which is very interesting. So I will try to start putting some iPad tutorials on my YouTube channel. Since there seems to be a demand for it. Yeah, I think a full-blown course for ZBrush for the iPad hasn't been created yet. So that's something that definitely needs to be done. Okay, so I'm gonna, we're gonna clean this up more after I do ZRemesh. So I'm just gonna go segment by segment and do stuff like get rid of some of these little bits right here. Oh, my brain stopped. Okay. I'm going to click on that once, click on it again. I was just trying to isolate that polygroup, and then I can do modify topology, delete hidden. There we go. Just get in the ballpark for now. And let's see, we want to, this is why I keep the originals around so I can take a look. So what we want is we need something that fits into the socket right here. right? And the little ball and socket. So what I can do is use the inflate tool. Let's save this real quick. And sculpt this and kind of build out a little surface there. And what I'll do is I'll turn on transparency. This would be faster if I just use move here. Just grab this. All the finicky stuff about getting the anatomy correct, we can save for a later time. We just want to get the basic shape there. The nice thing about ant legs is that they are, I'm going to do each individual leg, the individual pair of legs. So I'm going to work on this leg, get it nice looking, and then pose it so that it's not all tangled up in the middle, and then just mirror it over the other side, and then that's one pair of legs. So I'm basically going to have to go through this process 3 times, not 6 times. With some insects, if you're really in a hurry, the legs can be similar enough that you can actually model one set of legs and duplicate it and then adapt it as needed. I've done that before when I'm in a super big hurry. And for some insects like the mantis, that's not going to work because each pair of legs is very, very different. Same with a bee. The back legs of a bee are really different from the front legs, and they're really different from the mid legs. But an ant, sometimes you can get away with it. Just make sure that you pay attention to the differences between each pair of legs before you do that. Don't get too lazy, or you're going to be just like those AI jerks. Okay, and then we'll do this. Okay, let's declare that part done. Move on to the next one. This one's probably pretty easy. Let's see. I'm just looking at the way it joins up with the trochanter there. Let's go back to inflate. Would be nice to find out if you could do a live stream from the iPad. Might be able to do that. I don't know. Anybody know if there's OBS for iPad? Okay, so we have little blobs here. Let's see if there's a faster way to fix this. I'm going to just do this. Dynamesh. There we go. That's another way to get rid of those little bits. So that part's looking pretty good. We got little. If you want it, another way to, if you're trying to find those little stray polygons, you can always turn on flat color and like set the background to like black, and then it's easy to see those little stray polygons. Hold on a second. Oops, something bad happened. All right. Something bad happened. We lost our ant. No. Okay, something bad happens. We'll do, I'm going to say this as A. And I think I messed it up. Restart ZBrush. Yeah, that don't look too good. That is messed up. Okay, that's okay, because I saved a version just like 3 minutes before, so only lost a few minutes of work. So let me end this. End it. Restart. Sorry about that. Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes I think Sculptress is causing some issues, so I'm going to work without Sculptress here for a minute. I think Sculptress sometimes also causes those little stray polygons issues. So I just smooth this out and re-Dynamesh. Without Sculptress, you can avoid those problems. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to go in here and do just a negative inflate, just to create a little bit more of a cavity here. Okay. We'll say that one is done. Let's save it. Now this one's a little bit more of a challenge because we have this. And if we take a look at our scan data, you can see that this is kind of like a ball joint right here that fits into this socket. But on my geometry, I don't have anything right here. So we just need to do a little bit of inflating, some re-dynameshing just to add some meat there. Now you can see I'm creating a lot of overlapping geometry, so this could cause a problem when I re-Dynamesh. So, but we're going to just see if we can do it. Nope, that time it was pretty good. Let's double check, make sure nothing funky happened. And then we can smooth this out. And then use our original scan data to, whoops, where's my move brush? There it is. Just as a guide, rough guide. Let's go down here and do a little cleanup right here. Smooth brush and plate brush. I can usually move brush right here. I'm going to smooth out some of these little details right here. I can sculpt them back in later. What I need to do is get some additional visual reference for this species. See if there's any images online that I can use as a guide. But the scan is right now going to be probably the most reliable source. There's still a lot we don't know about insect anatomy. Which is interesting because people are like, why would anybody care about ants other than, they're really interesting. There's the social behavior and Ed Wilson, all that. Well, just in terms of economic issues, entomology in general is strongly tied to agriculture, which, as you know, is a huge economic concern. It's not just worried about, pest control in your house or that kind of thing, but it's also in terms of how use of pesticides and that kind of thing affect our food supply. And even so for example, fire ants initially, Solenopsis invicta is the most notorious fire ant species in the United States. And it's only been in the United States since 1930s, 1940s. It was actually Ed Wilson who figured out, and he did this when he was a teenager, by the way, that the fire ant Solenopsis invicta was accidentally imported through the port of Mobile, Alabama on an agricultural ship from South America. So in South America, there are many different types of fire ants, and that's where Solenopsis invicta actually came from. But there's also many natural controls for fire ants because they evolved there over millions of years. So they also have their own predators and that kind of stuff, their own biological control. But in the United States, they didn't have the same predators, natural predators or biological control. So they went crazy and they took over the South. So anybody who's lived in the southern United States knows about fire ants, knows about Solenopsis invicta, painful stings and that kind of stuff. This is the kind of thing that can deeply affect agricultural workers working in the field. Step on a fire ant mound and you could be at best irritated, at worst sickened. There's some people who are allergic to fire ant venom and they can actually die. So it's a huge economic concern. So understanding ants, understanding ant biology isn't just an esoteric sort of field of study, it's economically important and vital. Because the other thing is if you start, like in the 40s and 50s, everybody's like, well, just use some pesticides, kill all the bugs, right? That's not necessarily a good idea either. As has been reported a lot, there are far fewer bugs in the United States than there used to be, worldwide actually, because of pesticide use. We've been killing bugs for many decades now on a massive scale. So guess what? There's less bugs. If there's less bugs, there's less food for birds to eat, and then you basically have a cascading effect through the entire ecosystem, which again, maybe you don't care about it because you're not an environmentalist, but you will care about it because you have a stomach and you're hungry, and it'll affect the food supply along with everything else. So ants And ants are a fundamental part of every ecosystem, with the exception of Antarctica. Because of their social behavior, they are one of the most powerful insects, and actually one of the most powerful predators on the planet. People don't think about it because they're not as big and scary as a jaguar or a shark. Yeah, it's a good point. So Kelly on TV says also highways and cars in general are killing so many bugs. And the interesting thing is people have noticed recently that, you know, back when I was a kid, you drive across the country, your car would be covered in dead bugs, right? You have to clean them off. And that's happening less and less because there are fewer and fewer bugs, which is a bad sign, you know. And this has been documented in not just the United States, but in Europe as well, and many other places. All right, I'm just fiddling with this a little bit to simplify it. We'll come back to it later when we have some better reference. But at least now I'm going to turn on my mask by polygroups. And just tuck that in there. Okay, let's save this. This part is going to be a little bit faster because these segments are a lot simpler. So what I'm going to do now, let's turn our reference to C. So we probably want to have a bit of more geometry in here just to create something that we can tuck into that joint. So, you know, insects have their muscles on the inside of their bones, exoskeleton. So the exoskeleton is their bones. But they also work in pairs, just like mammalian bones. So, you know, you have pairs of muscles, right, on your arm. And muscles always pull, they never push. So when this muscle is, the bicep is pulling, and the tricep, these muscles are relaxing, and vice versa. The same thing with insects. They have pairs of muscles on the inside of their joints, and they are kind of attached at the ends of each segment and work like a pulley system. So sometimes you can see a subtle S-curve to the joint, the segment, sort of indicating that this right here would be the lever point of the muscles. Kind of cool. That's why it's like when people do insectoid concept art and they have a bug with like rippling muscles or something like that, that always disturbs me because it's like, it's not really how insects work. Okay, so let's save this. We're going to try doing some, and turn off mask by polygroups. When you're working with Sculptress mode, and you notice I'm going to turn it off. If I turn my mask by polygroups all the way up, notice how Sculptress mode is grayed out. So normally inflate and smooth work just fine with Sculptress mode, but anytime you have some kind of specialized masking like backface mask or mask by polygroups, Sculptress won't work. So if you're wondering why it's grayed out, check and see if you have some kind of masking option on that's keeping it, preventing it from working. So I'm going to turn mask by polygroups off, turn Sculptress mode on, and then it should work like normal. That's one of the things that drive me crazy. It's like, why won't Sculptress work? And it's just something simple like that. Sometimes you'll get a warning as you switch from one brush to another. It'll say, this brush has backface mask on, so Sculptress ain't going to work. I feel like I've had a lot of caffeine this morning. Okay. So you can see I made it a little bit too big here. I'm going to turn Sculptress off. Just do a little shrinky dink. Alrighty, we're getting close here. That's looking pretty good. just making sure everything's in place. It can be rough. Rough is fine at this point. Yeah, the links that are posted in the chat are usually coming from Maxon. So they have some links to some tutorials, and I do believe they have some iPad tutorials in there, but I don't think they have a complete course yet. So let's see if I can put something together if I have some time. I appreciate when you guys complain about if you want more tutorials on a particular subject, because it gives me ideas for stuff to do to my YouTube channel and lets me know that there's some information out there that you guys are hungry for. It's hard to know because I don't know, there's so many YouTube channels. I don't know what's out there already. So, and if you're into my teaching style, then I can try and bring that to new tutorials. And I do stuff other than bugs, actually. I just like to do bugs most of the time, especially on my live stream. But I actually modeled pretty much I just came out with a Gnomon series on Maya, Introduction to Maya 2026, in 3 volumes, 16 hours of tutorials, all on Maya. And for most of it, I used an example of a French cafe that I modeled, and my wife Irene did a lot of the texturing and some of the modeling as well. But we did a lot of the modeling actually in ZBrush. So I do all kinds of different modeling in ZBrush, environments, sometimes character. I was working on sort of insectoid character, but I switched over to AntScan just because it was very topical and it's in the news and that kind of thing. I'll get back to that character eventually once I get this ant in good shape. Okay, so let's see. This is probably a little bit too big, but that's okay. Now let's take a look at our scan data to see what happened to the foot. See if there's a foot we can steal. Here's a foot we can steal. So make sure we have the right number of segments. Yes, it's 1, 2, this one, and then here's the foot. So I'm going to click on this. Zoom out here real quick. And I'm going to duplicate this leg. All right, turn on solo, so now I have a duplicate. And I'm going to cut off this foot. Comme ça. Do geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Now I got a stray foot. So we'll just rename this. Foot. And then I can duplicate it because I probably want to use that again. So all right. Okay, turn off solo. Every time I say solo, I hear Jabba the Hutt's voice in my head for some reason. Okay, so now we got a foot we can use. La 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 la. All right, and then I'm going to just clean this up a little bit. Do geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, do a little Dynamesh on there. Now, depending on what you want to do, maybe you want to separate these parts right here from the rest of the foot. Depends on your ultimate goal. How, this is in most animations, these are going to appear as tiny little dots. If you're doing 3D print or something like that, you're going to have everything joined up in the end anyways. Well, most of the big parts. So you may want to keep this as part of the foot, these little claw parts, or you may want to have them separate for now. We can always make that decision later as well. For now, I'm going to keep this all as one part so I don't have too many parts. I'm just kind of defining this real quick. Okay, and then we Dynamesh it, and then I'm going to turn off solo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this subtool, Control-Shift-click on this once, once, and then twice to hide it. So this is what we're left with, and then I'm going to do modify topology, delete hidden, and then if I turn off, if I go over here and turn on my foot, there's my foot. So right now I have two different subtools. I have right front leg and I have foot. So I'm just going to merge these into one subtool. So just do merge. I don't need weld or UV, so just do merge down. Okay, and now you can see it's still got different polygroups. Let's make sure we go down here to keep everything as a separate polygroup. So auto groups, everything is a separate polygroup. That's good. And then we're going to do an auto save. Go back to geometry, Dynamesh. Groups is on, and I'll do another Dynamesh. And then a save. And then what we're going to do is go to ZRemesh. So I'm going to control click on this point in history. So it's going to store the state in history because I want to make sure that I keep these basic shapes. So I have something to project from as I Dynamesh. And now I'm going to go into subtool and turn off Dynamesh, go into ZRemesh, make sure I have keep groups turned on, right? I don't want to lose my groups. I can turn off adaptive. I'm going to set the polygroup to half. So right now we're at 169,000 points. So now I'm going to do a ZRemesh. The nice thing about insects is you don't have to be super freaked out about topology. Just want to make it to the point where we don't have too many spirals or that kind of thing to make UV texture mapping easier. So I'm going to do ZRemesh a few more times, get it nice and low poly. So this is like 9,000 points. So that's fairly low poly, but overall it looks pretty good. We can always improve the topology later, but I think for now it's okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a projection. So project history, even at this low polygon state, just to kind of bring back that shape. So we want to go to subtool, project. Don't care about color. Project history. So you can see, looks a little mangled. No problem. We can clean it up. I'm going to subdivide it maybe a couple times, and then I'm going to turn on this material so it's easier to see what's going on. So it's like Control-Shift-click right here. Just do a little smoothing. Turn mask by polygroups. Get to the move brush. We can tuck this stuff in. This is why I don't spend a whole lot of time in Dynamesh mode trying to get details perfect, because I know I'm going to eventually ZRemesh it so I have the state where I have multiple subdivisions. So less detail, but I can always project history. Bring those shapes back, and then I can refine the detail. I'm going to pose this first. Nothing dramatic, just something that's going to be easier to work with. And I'm going to keep this all as one subtool. In the past, I'd break a different subtool for each different part of the leg, but that could be a nightmare because you're dealing with 6 legs and you're going to have, 8 subtools for each site. You're going to end up with like 48 subtools for the legs, and that's just too much of a pain. You can use folders to keep that under control, but I still find it easier as long as you can use something like mask by polygroups. Then you can keep everything as one subtool, and it'll make your life a lot easier. I might even create one subtool for each pair of legs. Okay, so we have this, and then our point count is now 149,000. I'm going to subdivide it one more time. It doesn't have to be crazy, just enough to get a little bit of that shape in there. So all the fine detail is going to be sculpted. Project history. Of course, it kind of undid some of the changes I made there, but that's okay. Just smooth this out a little bit. So we got some issues right here. We can clean this up real quick. Okay, looking pretty good. Just a little smoothing. And now what we could do, I'm going to save this. And I'm going to so here's where our model looks like right now. Eventually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this abdomen out of the way. So we might want to do that now, actually. Here's our, this is our final abdomen. That's the original. In this case, I kept them as different subtools. So what I could do is I'm going to move this entire abdomen folder, all the geometry, including the original scan, just out of the way a little bit so I can start to position the legs. So you can see it looks a little bit awkward because our original scan is off center. Which part is off center here? Oh, that's our original scan. So let me hide that. Sorry, go back here. There we go. I'll turn on the thorax just for reference. So I'm going to take the abdomen group here, and I'm going to, let's save this real quick. Save next. And I'm going to click on this little gear icon. Let's make sure we have all this stuff visible. Click on this gear icon and choose transpose set, and that gives me the gizmo. You can see I still have it positioned in the right place. So now I can move all of these parts at once. If anything's masked or anything like that, you'll see some weird stretching. So if you see distortion, it's probably because there's still a mask on one of the subtools. But then this looks okay. So I'm just going to move it out of the way for now so that I can have an easier time with the legs. And I'm moving the original scan data with it, so just in case I need to use that for reference when I go back and start detailing it, I can have it in the same position. If I look at my original scan, it's still, the abdomen is still right here. So there you go. Okay, so now that I have that, I can click on the pizza boxes here to turn off the move set options. And I can hide this, and then let's go down to our right front leg. And really all I need to do is I can keep the coxa and the trochanter and the femur in position, and really just move the these parts of the leg out, just rotate them out a little bit so that they're free of the center. So that way when I mirror it across the center line, I'm not, messing it up. So I'm going to turn on solo here, and let's set the geometry down to the lowest subdivision level. I'll turn on this material so it's easy to see, and I'm just going to do this. Control Shift click on this, whoops, this, and this to hide them. Control Alt to mask everything. So this part is masked, this part is not masked. And then I'll use my gizmo, Alt click right here just to quickly get the gizmo over there. I'm going to just spend a few seconds, position the gizmo, so that it's in line with where I want to pivot from, something like that. And then do this. Move it up a little bit. Just a little bit of adjustment. Don't have to go crazy. And then what I might do is Alt click on this. Well, sorry, what I want to do is Control click on this, just so I mask everything out for that one polygroup. Move this out like this. Okay. Now I have, did I call this a right front leg? I don't know, what the coffee's going in my head. This is a back leg, not a front leg. Let's rename that real quick. Make sure it's the right leg too, because at this point I don't know what to believe. Back leg. Thank you. Mr. Backwards Ant. Mrs. Backwards Ant, sorry. And it's also, that's not right, that's on the left side, right? This is the front where the head is, and this is the abdomen, then this is the, no, this is right. Nope, this is the left. This is my right hand, this is my left hand. Having ant dyslexia problems. We're just going to call this back legs. How about that? Lost my mind. Okay, so I'm just positioning this kind of in the center here of the ant, where I want to have the center point. I could do a mirror and weld. I don't want to do that because I have subdivisions on here. So instead, I'm going to use the Subtool Master and just mirror this leg over. So we'll go to Z plugin, Subtool Master, mirror. Actually, what I'm going to do before I do that, I'm going to save this. Always save before you do anything major with subtools, because sometimes it can be hard to undo otherwise if you mess up. So, Subtool Master, mirror. I'm going to merge into one subtool across the x-axis. The nice thing about this mirror option in the Subtool Master is it's going to keep the levels of subdivision. So let's make sure that it works. Looks pretty good. Did it actually keep the levels of subdivision, or did it mess me up? Interesting. It did not keep the levels of subdivision. Well, now you know why I save before I do that. Okay, I wonder why I didn't do that. Make sure everything's visible, nothing is masked. Let's try that again. What we can do is we can also just have it mirror and then keep the append as new subtool. Sometimes that's a safer way to go. Let's try that. Okay, now we have two subtools. Does this have levels of subdivision? Yes. Okay, I know this looks like a mess on the screen, so let's see what we got out here out of everything. We've got two back legs, and both of them have levels of subdivision, right? What I'm going to do is, so I'm going to go into Preferences, Config, Enable Customize, and Control Alt Drag this down here, so I have to keep opening this up. And then I'll go Preferences, turn off Enable Customize, Store Config. Okay. Okay, so both have levels of subdivision. I set this to the highest subdivision level, set this to the highest subdivision level. Save this. So if you want to merge two subtools that have levels of subdivision, then you want to make sure that they have the same number of subdivision levels. So both of these subtools have 4 subdivision levels. I'm going to put both of them on the highest subdivision level, right? And then yeah, it's weird how it's displaying like that. We'll give it a try. And then I should be able to do a merge down, and it should keep those levels of subdivision. Yeah, it's a weird display issue. When I go up, for some reason it's displaying the geometry at the highest subdivision level, but it does have 4 levels of subdivision. You can always do this. Go into Geometry, delete higher, and then subdivide it. There we go. Okay, that works. I'm going to go back and refine these a lot more when we actually add the detail. But now we have a pair of legs. So just to do a quick review of where we come from, we can look at original scan data. This is what we started with in terms of that leg. Not super useful. And this is where we've ended up. Nice pair of legs, levels of subdivision, okay topology. You can UV map it, rig it, animate it, detail it, whatever. So, you know, fairly involved process. Once you've done it a few times, it gets faster and faster and easier. Mostly, you know, like anything with experience, you learn from the mistakes you make, and you learn how to make the process gradually more efficient over time until it becomes fairly quick. The first few times you do it, it can be slow and painful, but after a while, it gets pretty fast. Main thing is you want to separate everything into polygroups. Separate it into different meshes within the subtool. Use Dynamesh for cleaning things up and getting rid of the stray goo that you don't need, the little polygons you don't need. Then do a ZBrush. Keep everything as a polygroup. Everything is a separate mesh within those subtools. Mirror it over, and then you have the symmetrical. Look at these guys. Then you have symmetrical legs that you can work with. Reason that, well, okay, why do insects curl up as they die? Well, they become desiccated, so they lose all the moisture in their body. Obviously, there's an art to pinning insects. And if you look at my studio here, you can see that up there in the ceiling, I have a whole bunch of framed insects. Shit, I can even do better than that. Let's see. See. Here we go. Let's see. Here's a nice SCADA for you. You can see this one has been pinned. I bought this one at like a bug fair, and somebody spent the time to uncurl the wings and the legs and all that kind of stuff, so that it's not all messed up. It's harder to do that with ants, obviously. Here's an example. Whoops, sorry about that. Hitting the microphone. There we go. Nice beetle. You can see it's still in its pinned position. So there's kind of an art form to doing that, uncurling them, but it's easier to do with bigger insects than smaller insects. But as, you know, it's mainly just due to the fact that their moisture is leaving their body and there's, you know, curled up on the inside. Now, spiders, on the other hand, spiders use a completely different muscle system than insects. They actually have more of like a hydrostatic muscle system, so that they literally have fluid within their limbs, and they control the pressure of the fluid in order to move their legs. Which is a really interesting and important distinction to understand between spiders and insects. So that means that spiders, of course, when they die, they really shrivel up in a way that makes it very, very difficult. That's why you don't see a lot of scan data of dead spiders and that kind of thing, because it's harder to get, you know, once you kill a spider, unless you like freeze it or something like that, it's going to curl up. However, for some arachnids like scorpions and Blypygid, which is my favorite all-time arachnid, you know, they molt on a regular basis, and you can take those molts and you can pin the molts. So in that case, you're actually looking at the spider's laundry, not really a dead spider, or I should say scorpions and Blypygid. You can, I think, find molts of like a tarantula or something like that you can. I don't know if I've seen that many of them, but you know, I think it can be done. But there are some arachnids that have more of a hard shell than other spiders. But yeah, I do keep a lot of insect. I collect them when I can. I haven't done it in a long time, but when I lived in LA, I would go to the annual bug fair, buy a few bugs. You can also buy some dead bugs online. They're very, very cheap. They'll mail them to you, and they can be in nice condition. I'm going to do a quick shout out to some of my favorite websites, because in terms of reference, you can't beat it. Well, except for Scan. Scan is the ultimate reference. Next to that, if you can have a live, not a live, but an actual insect. So we go to the Butterfly Company. I order from these guys a lot. They have a really nice collection, and these are not expensive at all. I mean, you get a beetle or a butterfly for like $12. It's pinned in decent condition. Here's a good spider, and one of my favorites. All right, so this is most likely a molt that's been pinned. This is a golden brown orb weaver. I love these guys. But yeah, it's a great reference to have, because you can look at them under a microscope, or what you can do is like when I was working on my longhorn beetle a couple years ago, I just took some macro pictures, like 100 macro pictures, and then I can throw those into Pure Ref or something like that. And then I have visual reference, or I can bring them into ZBrush, and that's really a great way to work. If you can get a good scan data and then images of the same bug like that, and then actual specimen, then you got pretty much everything you need. It's always good to have supplemental like entomology books, so that you actually understand what you're looking at in terms of the anatomy. You know, it's like we've all seen, you know, for any of us who've done any kind of human figure drawing or sculpting, you can tell the difference between sculpting without any knowledge of anatomy and sculpting or drawing with a knowledge of anatomy. It's a lot different. It's the same thing with insects, the same thing with any life form. It's always good to have an understanding of the anatomy. You don't necessarily have to be a leading expert in the world. I definitely make mistakes, especially when I label some of my insect anatomy, and there's still much for me to learn. But at least having a baseline level will make it much more informed. And then when you go to do your cool creature sculpts and concept work, you're working from an informed place, and your bugs will be, and your insect creatures will be much more interesting and much more believable. And that's another thing that's going to separate you from AI, because all AI can do is look at a bunch of images and look at a bunch of videos and then do its best to kind of squish them together into something that looks believable. And it does a very good job of that. But as you can see from the AI animations I was showing earlier, there's loads and loads of mistake because it doesn't know what's right or wrong. So this is another thing that can separate you from AI. Of course, you could also use AI in some cases to help with these kinds of things, like I said, the scan technology, the synchrotron scans that I'm using for this ant and other bugs. They use AI, but it's more of computational effect than anything else to speed up the process. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense. Okay, so what I can do now is, we've got about a half an hour left. So my choices are to work on another pair of legs. So I think I'll do that because I might do the rest of the legs offline. There's another thing we can do though. Let's see if we can cheat. And we're going to do this by looking at the other legs and seeing how different are they from what we already have. So here is a mid leg, and as you can see, it is different. Not completely different, but it is slightly different in terms of shape. But the anatomy, if we look at our back leg here and our mid leg here, for the most part is the same, right? It's really just a matter of shape differences. So in that case, rather than go through the entire process, if we want to be super accurate, of course, we could go through the entire process like I just did on the back legs for the mid legs. But the argument that I'm going to make for just duplicating the back legs and repositioning them and making those in the mid leg is that now we have a decent ZRemesh topology. So that means that, like, let's say we want to be efficient. Eventually we're going to create UV texture coordinates for this. If we have the same geometry or topology for each pair of legs, that's going to make UV unwrapping and all that kind of stuff easier and more consistent to work with. So this is my rationale for cheating and just duplicating the other legs. The other thing is as we're sculpting the details, I'm going to sculpt the details on each set of legs separately. If in that process I start to find, okay, well, I've got significant anatomical differences, well, I can always update the model. That's not that big a deal. But in terms of getting it done quickly, let's just duplicate the back legs and put them into position and call them the middle legs. And we can do the same probably for the front legs as well. Again, it also depends on how much time you have to spend on this model. If you have to do a lot of these very quickly for a client, which I've had to do, then you may have to resort to cheating by duplicating the legs. Certainly when you're doing like an amphipod, which has lots and lots of legs, it doesn't make any sense to do this for each set of legs because it'll take forever. Okay, so we're going to take the back legs here, and this is our original scan data, so we can hide this. I'm going to duplicate this and rename it mid legs. And then I'm going to do this. Let's turn on symmetry. Let's put this down to the lowest subdivision level. And then let's turn on not dynamic symmetry, but local symmetry. And then I'll just start to move this into place. Sometimes with ants, you'll find that like maybe the back legs are a lot longer than the front legs or the mid legs. In that case, you can just scale these things into position. In this case, it's hard to tell right now, but we can get some photographic reference and then find that out. And then you just matter of changing the scale. So that's pretty good for now. It's like if you're doing with, like I've done this for clients for like museums and stuff like that, then generally speaking, they'll have like an insect expert, an entomologist, who can review the model and tell you what's right and what's wrong or what you need to fix. This right here is that's the back leg. So I'm really only interested in the front mid legs. So let's go back here. You can see the front legs are a bit different because they have a different shape for the coxa. But I think that's going to be good for now. We can always, as we go forward, make changes as needed later on. But I think that's good for the mid legs. Probably do this. And then if this is going to be rigged, you want to make sure that the legs are all in the same spot on the ground. Okay, so there's a link to some ZBrush iPad tutorials here in the chat. The only time I bought bugs is as a snack. Well, that's cool. You're not actually a spider, are you? I hate to think that the spiders are gained enough intelligence that they're watching live streams. So let's take a look at the front legs here. This one and this one. This one's got a little bit more separation. This is different right here. This is a bit different. This is a bit different. So I think that's a case to be made that we can go through the process for the front legs again. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it. What I might do is I'm going to move these out of the folder here so that I can have a separate folder for the scan stuff and a separate folder for the stuff that I'm working on. So we'll rename this folder. My brain stopped. Where's rename? Rename. There we go. We'll call this scanned legs here, and then we'll make a new folder right here. We'll call this like retopo legs. So this is back legs, this is mid legs, and then we'll call this front legs. Okay. So let's first get rid of any of this extra schmutz that we don't need. So I'm going to switch to select lasso. It's a good idea when you're working like this to make sure that under display properties have double turned on, because otherwise you can miss some of these little stray bits. So I'll do geometry, modified topology, delete hidden. Then I'm going to do a quick polygroups, auto groups. So you can see we have, I control shift click on this. it hides any of the stray groups, and I can do, again, geometry, delete hidden. Now I know I'm just left with this mesh here. And so now it's the same thing. I just start by creating polygroups for each one of these different parts. And quick way to do that, I'm going to use select lasso. Control W. Actually, what I'm going to do is this. Sorry. Faster way to do this is to hide this, Control W. Hide this, Control W. Get some little crazy stuff going on there. Hide, Control W. Don't know what the name of that is. I'm sure it has a name. I have to look that up. As you can see, this is what we're doing so far. So we're going to do these polygroups. I'm going to do the easier ones and drill down to the harder ones. Just finding an angle where I can get a nice clean selection. Hide that. Hide that, Control W. Control W. This one, what I'll do is this. Control W. And then really quickly I can just paint a mask. Sorry, something weird happened there. Let's try that again. I think my elbow hit part of the keyboard, which messed things up. Control W, and then I'm going to Control Shift click on this point that's shared by those two polygroups. Control W, now that's its own polygroup. So let's just go in here real quick and see where we can do any other cleanup. I'm just kind of rearranging these polygroups so that when I Dynamesh a little bit neater, but you don't have to be that picky. Okay. That looks good enough. Oh, right here, I want to do this. Okay. Oh, one more. Okay, I'll call that good enough. We're going to do some more cleanup. The Dynamesh phase. Okay, so let's save this real quick. Let's save this in the next version. It's going to be 11. And now we'll go down to Geometry, Dynamesh, turn on our groups. Bring this up at some level, something like that's probably good. Turn on Dynamesh. So you see it closes the holes where we have holes, and then it also makes this a closed mesh. So now I can go in here, and just like I did before, I'll use like the inflate brush and smooth and just kind of get rid of any of these like weird little artifacts that are going to make it difficult to do a ZRemesh. In this case, the smooth brush pretty much takes care of it pretty well. Don't necessarily want to get rid of too much detail, just the stuff that I know is not helpful. And maybe I'll do a little negative inflate right here to create a cavity. Again, you can use Sculptress as well sometimes to get rid of some of this schmutz. So let's try that. I'll turn off Mask by Polygroups, turn on Sculptress, and then I can just kind of erase some of this stuff. Do a little inflate. Sometimes Sculptress drives me a little bit nuts. In this phase, I usually work very, very quickly, as quickly as I can, because it's kind of boring. It's not as fun as detailing. But again, my goal is just to get something that's usable, that I can detail, but still maintains the integrity of the original anatomy of this particular species. So there's a lot of variation in ant species. There's not just red ants and brown ants, or red ants and black ants. There are thousands of species, and even within a species, like if you're looking at something like a leafcutter ant, within a single nest, they can you have these different castes of ants, workers and soldiers and so on. Obviously the queen and the male ants and everything, and they have strikingly different morphological features depending on the caste. It's not true for all ant species, but some, especially ones that are really socialized, heavily socialized, like leafcutters. So when you're looking at the anatomy, like if you download something from AntScan, make sure you double check and see what you're working on. Is it a queen? Is it a worker? What's going on? What type of worker is it? And don't all assume that all the ants within a nest are going to be the same size and the same shape, because they could be really, really different. What's really cool is with ants like leafcutters, one of the biggest dangers that leafcutters face is that when they're out there gathering their little leaves, there are specific species of flies that are known as ant decapitating flies. These flies are incredibly small, and they're so small that they can actually go and land on an ant and lay an egg on an ant, and that egg can be laid in between the spaces of the segments. Maybe it's the leg segments, maybe it's the abdomen, depends on the fly, depends on the ant. And then what happens is that egg will basically become parasitic, just like the alien in the movie Aliens, right? And it can grow inside the ant and move throughout the ant while the egg is growing into a fly. And it'll move all the way into the head. It'll be small enough to move through the neck of the head into the head, and we'll start to gestate and take over the head. And eventually the head pops off, the ant dies, and little baby fly comes out. Miracle of birth. Isn't nature grand? So this is a serious danger, because obviously this is a type of infection, and if it spreads among the other ants, it can be devastating for an ant colony. And so you have, within leafcutters and some other species of ants, a type of worker, and this type of worker ant is so small that it will ride on the back of the larger workers, and its entire job is to fend off these flies and keep the flies from landing on the main worker, which is really fascinating. So in this case, you definitely have within the one species, within one colony of ants, this variation in size where you have these gigantic leaf cutters, relatively speaking, leaf cutters, and then these little soldiers that ride on the back of the workers and protect that from the little flies. This is pretty cool. So you're going to be paying attention when you're working with the scan data as to exactly what caste of ant you're working with, if you're concerned about accuracy. But also, just shows that a little bit of, 10% of learning of entomology can lead to an entire science fiction franchise. Because basically the entire Alien franchise is based on wasps, parasitoid wasps. That's all it is, with an H.R. Geiger design and amazing special effects and budget and all that kind of stuff and great writing. But the core of it is just a little bit of entomological knowledge. Can be very inspiring for science fiction. So consult your local library, read some books. You never know what kind of inspiration you're going to come up with. You'd say a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, but little knowledge can also be an incredibly inspiring and profitable thing too, depending on how you use it. Okay, so I got about 5 minutes left. So you can get the gist of how the rest of this is going to go. I'm just going to clean this up, do some ZRemesh, duplicate it over to the other side. Then I got my front legs ready to sculpt. And then I think that once I finish the front legs, all I have left, then I can actually get to the detailing part. Start maybe unfolding the ant a little bit more, separating the head, the thorax and the abdomen in space, and the legs, and I can start sculpting the detail. And just to give you a little preview, as I mentioned, last time when I was working on the head here. Let's turn off transparency. Find their head. Where's our head? So this is probably what I'm going to be doing. Well, this is what I'll work on next week, is the head. Because the issue that we have with the head, aside from it being in a weird position, is here's my original scan. Oh, sorry, this is my symmetrized version of it. Nope, sorry, this is the original. So you can see that the detail on here is asymmetrical, right? This groove does not match this groove, and that's what makes it interesting looking. This is the redone version that I have. It doesn't have any detail on it, but it is perfectly symmetrical in terms of topology, right? So we have symmetry back here. So I'm going to need to project this asymmetrical detail onto this symmetrical model and start sculpting based on that. And then we have the mouth parts. Same deal. This needs some refinement and some detailing. And then the antenna. So next week I will be working on the head of this ant and starting to sculpt in the detail, making it look cool, which is always my favorite part. The first part of it, just cleaning up the scan data, is a little bit, it's labor. It's not exactly super fun, but it can be interesting. But it's not as fun as detailing. So I'll be doing that next week. And I'll just spend the last few minutes here on my front legs. Cleaning this up just a little bit more. Could actually even do a ZRemesh at this point because they're kind of close. I think this is part of the original shape. As far as I can tell, that's part of the shape of the leg, so I don't want to lose that. It looks like there's a chunk of geometry missing here, but I don't think that's not the case. That's what this leg segment looks like. So I want to make sure that we keep that. So always keep your original scan data as a separate subtool so that you can compare as you work, because it's easy to get lost and start making mistakes otherwise. Like, I'm not sure if this is supposed to be like this. This could be. Let's see what does it look like on the other leg. And this, yeah, it's hard to tell if this sort of hammerhead shape right here is an artifact or that's what it's supposed to look like. We'll have to find some reliable reference online to make that determination, but we can do that later. Let's clean this up real quick. Do a quick Dynamesh. Should Dynamesh turn off here. Alrighty. Now we have this. We can do ZRemesh. I'm going to go fix this down here. All right. Store the state in history. Control click right there. The history state that'll live in infamy. Okay, and then ZRemesh. We're going to set this to half. Turn off adaptive. Keep groups. ZRemesh. Do it again. ZRemeshing when you have these little bits right here, I don't want to necessarily lose these. If I ZRemesh too much, they might disappear. But I don't know, maybe it's something. It's pretty easy to sculpt that back in. So let me get it down to a nice low level. Let's compare it with the other legs. These are 18,000, so front legs 12,000, so that's probably good. So now what we can do is project history. And there we go. And then we can just duplicate it over to the other side. Let's rename this. Yeah, it's renamed. Save it real quick. C plugin, subtool master. Whoops, mirror. I'm going to append his new subtool. What happened there? I don't know. Something crazy. Ended up with a whole bunch of weird subtools. Okay, whatever. We'll see if this is a new version. And I'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot for joining me for the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Do I look at reference? I'm sorry for the person who just commented who said, hey, do I look at reference? Yeah, I've been talking about that this whole live stream. In fact, this is based on scan data, which is the ultimate reference. So, and I also was showing that I do have specimens. So you might want to, if you want to hear about how I use reference in working with these particular insects, you can go back and watch the stream from the beginning. But this is my initial scan reference right here. This is scan data that I downloaded. You can get scan data for free, and this is what I'm cleaning up right now. And then I'll be sculpting this into an ant. But it is going to be accurate, and I will be gathering some photographic reference. If I can find decent reference of this particular ant species online, I'll use that. But yeah, I use all kinds of references, much reference as possible, because my goal here is to create an anatomically correct model of this particular species of ant. So hopefully that answers your question, but yes, I do look at reference. So see you guys next week. Thanks a lot for joining me.